Imagine for a moment that you're standing in the middle of a crowded room. Voices are rising all around you, arguments, laughter, gossip, judgment, everyone desperately trying to be heard, to be seen, to prove they're right. Now, picture one person in that chaos who says nothing. They don't raise their voice, they don't defend themselves, they don't chase anyone's approval. And yet everyone feels their presence. Their quietness carries more weight than the loudest shout in the room. That is the paradox of true power. Welcome to today's video, where we're going to explore something most people overlook: the art of silence as a form of strength. The topic is called neverchase, neverbeg, neverexplain. Your silence becomes your superpower. This is not just about staying quiet when you're angry or hurt. It's about mastering a deeper discipline, the ability to walk away from chaos without a word, to stop giving explanations to those who don't deserve them, and to reclaim your peace by refusing to engage in the games of others. We live in a world that thrives on noise. Social media rewards outrage. Algorithms push us to speak before we think. Everyone is constantly reacting, defending, explaining, proving. If you've ever been misunderstood, ghosted by someone you cared about, or accused of something unfair, you know how tempting it is to explain yourself. You want to send that long text, that detailed email, that final speech to make them see your truth. But here's the hard reality: most of the time, they've already decided who you are in their story. Your explanations won't change anything. In fact, they often make you look weaker, like you're chasing validation instead of standing firm in your own worth. In this video, we're going to break down 6 powerful lessons that will change the way you think about silence forever. These are not abstract philosophical ideas. They are practical truths you can use in your daily life. We'll talk about why silence makes your absence louder than your presence, how it allows you to hear your own truth, why begging for closure only keeps you stuck, how actions reveal more than words ever could, why real confidence comes from not explaining yourself, and finally, how walking away quietly can teach others lessons they'll never forget. These are lessons drawn from the ancient wisdom of Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, but they're also grounded in modern psychology and real-life examples. Because while the world has changed, human nature has not. The same struggles we face today, pride, fear of rejection, the desire to control how others see us, are the same struggles people faced 2,000 years ago. The Stoics learned to navigate these challenges by focusing on what they could control and letting go of the rest. And that, my friends, is exactly what silence is: the ultimate act of control over yourself. As we dive into this journey together, I want you to do me a favor. Hit the like button if you've ever felt exhausted from explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand. Share this video with someone you know who needs to hear this message today, maybe a friend going through a breakup or a coworker dealing with toxic office politics. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you never miss out on future content about personal growth, Stoic philosophy, and emotional mastery. If this video really speaks to your heart, consider using the Super Thanks feature to support the channel. Your donations help us keep creating free, meaningful content for people all over the world who are searching for strength and clarity. Together, we can build a community that values depth over drama, reflection over reaction. Now, before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath. Seriously pause for a moment. Inhale slowly, hold it, and exhale. Feel the space that silence creates, even just for a second. That feeling? That calm? That's what we're going to cultivate throughout this video. By the end of our time together, you'll see why silence isn't about retreating or hiding. It's about rising above. It's about shifting from reaction to intention. It's about sending a message so clear that you don't have to say a single word. So let's step into this exploration of power, dignity, and freedom. Because once you understand how to never chase, never beg, and never explain, you'll never see conflict or yourself the same way again. In a noisy room, the quiet person usually holds the most power. Not because they win the argument, but because they refuse to audition for approval. You've seen it at a meeting. Voices pile on, each trying to out-explain the last, while one person listens, asks one precise question, and shifts the entire direction without raising their voice. That kind of presence isn't theatrical, it's disciplined. Lions don't need to roar to prove they're lions. The deepest parts of the ocean aren't loud. They carry crushing force you can't see from the surface. Silence, handled with intention, signals self-command. It says, I am not for sale to every demand. On my attention. We live in an age of overexposure and chronic explanation. People don't just do things, they announce them, justify them, post a thread about them, then go live to clarify the set. The loop is endless. Seek attention, get misunderstanding, launch a rebuttal, stir more noise, repeat. Social feeds reward speed and outrage, not reflection. And because attention has become a currency, we mistake visibility for value. The result is a perverse economy where the loudest claim wins the hour, and the calmest truth is buried beneath notifications. Stoicism cut straight through that tangle. Marcus Aurelius wrote privately to himself about training the mind to distinguish what can be controlled from what can't, and a focus on the former. Epictetus taught the same principle to former slaves and aristocrats alike. If your peace depends on things outside your command, other people's opinions, traffic, weather, algorithmic moods, you will never be at peace. Seneca, counseling statesmen in the furnace of Roman politics, returned to the same discipline. Master your responses, because the world rarely cooperates with your preferences. Their shared thesis is spare and uncompromising. The more you tie your worth to external reaction, the less of yourself you get to keep. Or, in Epictetus's clean line, the more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. If that sounds abstract, test it against an everyday scenario. You text someone something vulnerable. Minutes pass. Nothing. You feel the pull. Send a follow-up. Then another, maybe a paragraph that explains your intent. Each message is a small wire attaching your mood to their reply. You don't notice the trade at first. It feels proactive, even brave. But with each justification, your center of gravity slides further away from you. You've turned your well-being into a ballot to be counted on someone else's time. The Stoic alternative isn't passive aggression, it's deliberate containment. You said what you meant. You let time do its work. You'll measure relationships by reciprocity, not by how eloquently you can rationalize someone's indifference. Silence in this sense is not emptiness. It's a boundary. It's the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is a reflex that someone posts a jab, you jab back, and now you're trapped in a game you didn't choose. Responding is a decision. Sometimes the decision is to leave the move unanswered because the game is rigged to waste your life. Consider how many cycles of explanation you've burned in threads that never intended to understand you. You weren't in dialogue. You were performing to avoid being misread by people committed to misreading. To a Stoic, that's a poor bargain. You cannot be free if your mood depends on converting strangers into converts. The modern world incentivizes the opposite of Stoic restraint. News cycles demand instant takes. Platforms push you to join the conversation now, before nuance arrives. But urgency is a form of flattery the world pays itself. Not every bell deserves an answer. The mature move is to ask, is there anything in my control here worth acting on? If yes, act cleanly. If not, step back. That step back quiet, unadvertised, is where strength grows. It doesn't announce, I'm above this. It simply refuses to rent out headspace to what can't be stewarded. Think about leaders you trust. The best of them aren't constantly justifying themselves. They communicate clearly, but they don't litigate every rumor. They let patterns speak. They understand that over-explaining signals insecurity. If I keep talking, maybe you'll like me, or at least not leave me. Stoicism trains the opposite muscle. Don't argue your character, align your actions. Quiet consistency outlasts heated persuasion. The coworker who stops showing up late doesn't need a speech about punctuality. The friend who sets a real boundary and keeps it doesn't need a TED Talk on boundaries. When actions stack, words can shrink. There's also a physics to silence that most of us underestimate. When you disengage from the tug of war, the rope falls to the other side. People who baited you with provocation lose leverage because leverage requires your grip. That doesn't mean you punish people with a cold shoulder or weaponize aloofness. Stoic silence isn't a tantrum. It's the refusal to source dignity from reaction. If someone habitually treats you as optional, you teach them nothing by composing a dissertation on respect. You teach them much more by exiting the stage where your role was the apologetic one. Distance, handled without drama, is often the clearest feedback. This discipline isn't natural. The nervous system loves closure. Dopamine rewards the ping of a reply. That's why explanation feels soothing in the moment. It promises the illusion of control. But the comfort is rented, not owned. Once you see the bill, you notice it costs you hours you could have invested in what you actually control: your craft, your health, your circle, your word to yourself. The Stoics were frugal with emotion the way a great investor is frugal with capital. They didn't spend just to feel like they were doing something. They placed energy where returns compound. Habits, values, honest work. Everyday examples clarify this. On social media, a celebrity posts a messy apology thread that spirals into more backlash. The better move would have been a simple admission, a concrete correction, then quiet time doing the work. In sports, a team goes down early. The star doesn't argue calls all game that burns fuel. They reset, execute, and let the scoreboard address the narrative. In relationships, the person who keeps sending one more message after a breakup rarely finds dignity or healing there. The person who feels the pain, breathes, leans on friends, maybe sees a therapist, and resists the urge to relitigate the past, that person gives themselves back to themselves. None of this romanticizes silence as magic. There are moments to speak, to advocate, to disclose. Stoicism isn't muteness, it's proportion. You speak when speech serves a value you hold: truth, justice, care. You don't speak when speech serves anxiety, vanity, or a hope to micromanage perceptions. The divider is sovereignty. Am I acting from steadiness or fear? If it's fear, let the impulse pass through. You like weather. If it's steadiness, say the thing once, cleanly, and let it stand. The metaphor of the ocean helps here. Surface waves are loud and frantic. Go 60 feet down and everything slows. The pressure increases, the light dims, and movement becomes deliberate. You can't thrash there. You can serve air and choose every motion. The Stoic lives at that depth. They still feel the storm, but they don't let the storm decide their stroke. The world sees less of them and somehow gets more from them, because what they do reveal isn't reactive froth, it's considered signal. If you're tempted to think this is too austere for real life, start small. In your next heated text thread, insert a pause. Don't craft a better retort. Recenter. Ask, what do I actually want here? If the answer is to be understood, check whether the other party is in a state to understand anything. If not, no amount of prose will land. If the answer is to be respected, check if your boundary is intact. Respect usually follows consequence, not explanation. At work, when a mistaken assumption spreads about your project, resist flooding Slack with arguments. Document facts. Share them once, then continue shipping. Over time, reliability repairs more reputations than rhetoric ever did. Silence also turns you toward the kind of attention that matters. Attention to reality. So many conflicts are phantom fights with your own fantasy, what you wish someone would say, the perfect apology you script for them, the movie in your head where finally everyone gets your point. Reality is plainer. People are busy, biased, sometimes unkind, often distracted. You do not need the world to keep promises it never made. You need to keep the ones you make to yourself. That's where control lives. That's where peace stops being a slogan and becomes a practice. When you understand this, the cliche, choose your battles, becomes specific. Choose the battles where your choice changes the outcome. Choose the actions that move your life, not the arguments that merely move your adrenaline. And when you do choose to speak, let the words be few and fitted to the aim. The quiet person in the noisy room isn't withholding to seem mysterious. They're conserving power so that when they do speak, something actually changes. If any of this resonates, take it as a cue to simplify how you show up. Fewer disclaimers. Fewer, just to clarify, paragraphs. Fewer bids for instant validation. More attention to what you can build today that no opinion can confiscate. More walks without the phone. More drafts you don't post. More calls to people who know you offline and aren't grading your performance. The culture will keep shouting. You don't have to. You can be the steady one lion without roar, deep water without waves, and let that steadiness become your signature. Silence is often misunderstood in our culture. Many people think staying quiet means you've given up or you don't have the courage to speak, but that couldn't be further from the truth. True silence, the kind practiced by the Stoics, is not weakness. It is an intentional choice, a disciplined act of self-control. It's like standing tall while everyone else is running around in chaos. It takes far more strength to hold your tongue and keep your composure than it does to explode or over-explain. Speaking is easy. Staying silent, especially when your ego is screaming for attention, takes mastery over yourself. Imagine two different sources of light. One is a small candle. It flickers constantly, fighting against the slightest breeze, and eventually burns itself out quickly. The other is a lighthouse. It doesn't move, doesn't flicker, and doesn't need to scream for attention. It simply stands there, steady and unwavering, guiding ships through storms without ever saying a word. The person who constantly explains themselves, justifies every action, and reacts to every little comment is like that fragile candle, bright for a moment, but exhausting themselves. The person who practices silence is like the lighthouse, calm, steady, radiating power without burning out. People are naturally drawn to that kind of strength, even if they can't articulate why. Silence is a paradox. When you stop talking, you actually make people notice you more. Think about the last time you texted someone after a misunderstanding or an argument. Maybe they didn't reply right away. Your mind probably raced. Did they read it? Are they upset? Are they ignoring me? The silence becomes louder than words. This is why, in personal relationships, silence can be more powerful than 1,000 texts. If someone ghosts you, and your response is to send message after message, "Hey, are you there? Did I do something wrong? Please talk to me," you're actually pushing them further away and giving them control over your emotional state. They know you're waiting. They know they hold power. But if you stay silent, they're left alone with their thoughts. They begin to wonder what you're thinking. They question whether you've moved on. That discomfort forces them to confront their own behavior. Silence shifts the balance of power back to you. This dynamic plays out in the workplace too. Imagine a boss yelling at a team member in front of everyone. The natural instinct is to defend yourself, to argue, to try to prove you're right. But arguing in the heat of the moment rarely works. It usually escalates the conflict and makes you look defensive. A wiser approach is to stay calm and silent. Then let your actions speak for you. Deliver excellent results on the next project. Show through performance, not words, that you are capable and reliable. Over time, this silent consistency earns more respect than any loud argument ever could. It's the difference between shouting, "I'm valuable," and quietly demonstrating your value until no one can deny it. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. They taught that silence is a form of control, not over others, but over yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of mastering one's reactions. Epictetus emphasized that the only true power we have is over our own mind and choices. And Elbert Hubbard captured this beautifully when he said, "He who does not understand your silence will probably not understand your words." In other words, if someone doesn't respect your quiet strength, they wouldn't truly listen to your explanations either. Your silence, therefore, becomes a filter. It separates those who are genuinely attentive from those who are just waiting for their turn to speak. There's a psychological reason why silence works this way. When you respond to every comment, every criticism, every provocation, you feed the other person's behavior. It's like adding fuel to a fire. But when you withhold a reaction, you create a void. Humans are naturally uncomfortable with voids. They start to fill it with their own thoughts, doubts, and guilt. If someone disrespects you and you simply walk away without a word, they are forced to sit with the weight of their actions. They can't distract themselves by arguing with you. They can't twist your words or manipulate the conversation. All they have is their own reflection. In that moment, silence becomes a mirror. It says, I saw what you did. I felt how you treated me. And I value myself too much to explain it to you. That kind of silence is not passive aggression. It's clarity and self-respect. I once experienced this in a very personal way. A close friend and I had a major falling out. They said some deeply hurtful things, and my first instinct was to text to explain my side of the story. I wanted them to understand how much pain they caused me. But I stopped myself. I realized that no amount of explaining would change their mindset in that moment. So instead, I stayed silent. Days turned into weeks. Eventually, they reached out not to defend themselves, but to apologize. They told me that my silence had made them reflect more than any argument ever could. That experience taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not engage. By refusing to participate in the drama, you force others to face themselves. Silence also protects your energy. Words are expensive. Every explanation you give, every debate you enter, costs you emotional currency. If you're constantly explaining yourself to people who don't truly care, you end up bankrupt, drained, and resentful. By staying silent, you conserve that energy for things that actually matter: your goals, your growth, your inner peace. Think about social media arguments. Have you ever seen someone change their mind because of a heated comment thread? Probably not. Most people dig deeper into their positions. Meanwhile, you've wasted hours typing responses, getting more upset, while they've moved on to their next fight. Silence breaks that cycle. When you don't respond, the argument dies. Your attention is like oxygen to a fire. Remove it, and the flames go out. Some people fear that silence will make them seem weak or indifferent. But true strength doesn't need to announce itself. Consider how professional athletes handle trash talk. The greatest players don't engage in constant back and forth. They let their performance on. The field or court do the talking. Michael Jordan didn't need to respond to every insult. He just scored more points. Serena Williams doesn't argue with every critic. She wins matches. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's focus. It shows they know where their real power lies. This doesn't mean you should never speak up. There are times when words are necessary, when someone's safety is at risk, when injustice must be named, when boundaries need to be clearly stated. The key is intention. Stoic silence isn't about suppressing your voice. It's about choosing your moments carefully. You speak when it serves a purpose, not just to fill space or soothe your own anxiety. Most of the time, the wisest response is no response at all. When you practice this kind of silence, something shifts inside you. You stop chasing people who don't value you. You stop explaining yourself to those who have already decided not to understand. You stop giving away your power through constant reaction. Instead, you reclaim it. Your silence becomes a shield, protecting your inner world from external chaos. And as you grow stronger internally, others start to feel it. They may not know why, but they sense your presence. They notice when you're absent. They feel the weight of what's unsaid. This is why silence often speaks louder than words. It creates space for truth to emerge. It forces people to confront their own behavior. It preserves your dignity and energy. And most importantly, it reminds you that your worth isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. By choosing silence, you choose yourself. And in a world addicted to noise, that choice is revolutionary. The lesson here is simple but profound. Silence is not about punishing others or playing mind games. It's about self-mastery. It's about knowing that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries, your choices, or your existence. When someone mistreats you, your silence says, I will not participate in this chaos. When someone misunderstands you, your silence says, my truth doesn't require your approval. And when someone tries to provoke you, your silence says, you don't control my peace. In the end, silence is not the absence of power. It is power in its purest form. It is the steady lighthouse in the storm guiding you home. It is the mirror that forces others to see themselves. It is the discipline that turns chaos into clarity. And once you master it, you'll find that the people who truly matter will understand you. Without a single word. Those who don't understand, they were never really listening anyway. We live in a world that never stops talking. Notifications buzz on our phones every few seconds. Social media feeds are endlessly refreshing, and there's always another video, another message, another opinion demanding our attention. It's like standing in the middle of Times Square on New Year's Eve, surrounded by flashing lights and shouting voices, trying to hear your own thoughts. In this constant noise, most people don't pause to reflect, they react. A text comes in, and we fire back a reply. Someone posts a comment we don't like, and we instantly defend ourselves. A rumor spreads, and we rush to correct it. This cycle of constant reaction keeps us trapped on the surface of life, where emotions run high and clarity is nowhere to be found. The problem with this kind of hyper-reactivity is that it gives away our power. When you respond to every little thing without thinking, you let the outside world control your inner world. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, understood this over 2,000 years ago. He wrote, if you're distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. In other words, it's not the event itself that hurts you, it's the meaning you attach to it. Someone's harsh words don't automatically have power over you. It's your interpretation, your story about what those words mean that creates the pain. And the only way to change that story is to slow down and listen. Not to the noise outside, but to the stillness within. This is where the concept of sacred stillness comes in. Sacred stillness isn't just about being quiet on the outside. It's about creating a calm space inside yourself. Even when the world around you is chaotic. When you choose silence, not the passive kind, but the active, intentional kind, you give your mind the chance to separate feelings from values. Imagine a snow globe that's been shaken up. When you keep shaking it, the flakes swirl endlessly, and you can't see clearly through the glass. But if you set it down and leave it alone, the flakes slowly settle, and the scene becomes clear. Your mind works the same way. Silence is the act of setting the snow globe down. It allows your thoughts and emotions to settle so you can finally see what's really going on. Take anger, for example. When someone insults you, your first instinct might be to snap back, to defend yourself, to set the record straight. That's pure emotion talking. But if you take a moment of silence before responding, you give yourself the space to ask deeper questions. Why am I so angry? Is this really about them? Or is it about me? What do I actually value in this situation? My pride, my peace, my integrity. This pause can be life-changing. You might realize that what you thought was about the other person is really about an insecurity you've been carrying for years. You might discover that protecting your peace matters more than winning the argument. Without silence, you never get the chance to uncover those truths. There's a powerful story that illustrates this. Imagine someone who's been in a long-term relationship. One day, they discover their partner has been unfaithful. The natural impulse is to confront the partner immediately, to demand explanations, to scream and cry and try to fix what's broken. But this person does something different. They choose silence. They don't send angry texts. They don't stalk their partner's social media for clues. Instead, they sit with their pain. They journal about their feelings. They meditate, breathe, and reflect. Over time, they come to a painful but liberating realization. The relationship had been unhealthy for years. The betrayal was just the final crack in a foundation that was already broken. By choosing silence, they found a truth that no amount of shouting or questioning could have revealed. And when they finally did speak, it wasn't from a place of desperation, it was from a place of calm certainty about what they needed to do next. Science actually supports this ancient wisdom. Neuroscience has shown that silence activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and decision-making. When you pause before reacting, you literally give your brain time to shift from the emotional fight or flight response of the amygdala to the logical, thoughtful response of the prefrontal cortex. That's why taking a deep breath or counting to 10 really works. It's not just a cliche. It's a biological reset. This is also why people often regret things they say in the heat of the moment. Their brain was hijacked by emotion, and they didn't give it the silence it needed to regain control. When you slow down, you create a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. Think about driving in heavy traffic. Someone cuts you off, and your first instinct is to honk, yell, or even chase them down. But if you take a moment of silence, just one deep breath, you might realize that reacting aggressively won't change anything. You can't control the other driver, but you can control your own safety and peace of mind. That moment of stillness turns a potential road rage incident into a simple decision to let it go. The same principle applies to arguments with friends, family, or coworkers. When you respond immediately, you're likely to say something you'll regret. When you pause, you give yourself the chance to choose a response that aligns with your values. Silence also helps reveal the truth about other people. When you stop talking, you start observing. Instead of getting caught up in someone's words, you notice their actions, their patterns, their energy. People can say anything, but actions rarely lie. If someone claims to respect you, but consistently crosses your boundaries, their behavior tells you the real story. And you don't need to confront them with a long speech. Your silence, combined with clear boundaries, sends a louder message than words ever could. This kind of clarity only comes when you step back and create space for observation. In practical terms, applying this in daily life is simple, but not easy. When you feel misunderstood, resist the urge to immediately defend yourself. Instead, take a moment to breathe. Ask yourself, do I need to be understood by this person, or do I just need to understand myself? Often, the answer is the latter. When you feel insulted or provoked, pause before reacting. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Other times, a calm, measured response delivered later is far more powerful than an emotional outburst in the moment. Silence doesn't mean doing nothing, it means doing the right thing at the right time from a place of inner strength. Consider how this might play out at work. Let's say your boss criticizes you unfairly in a meeting. Your instinct might be to defend yourself on the spot, to explain why you're right and they're wrong. But if you stay silent, listen, and take time to reflect, you might realize that your boss was having a bad day, or that there's a deeper issue you need to address privately. By not reacting immediately, you maintain your professionalism and avoid escalating the situation. Later, when you've had time to think, you can choose whether to address the criticism calmly or simply let your results speak for themselves. Silence is also crucial in personal growth. When you sit quietly with yourself, you start to hear the subtle voice of your own values. In the noise of everyday life, it's easy to lose track of what truly matters to you. You get swept up in other people's expectations, social media trends, and external pressures. But when you practice sacred stillness through meditation, journaling, prayer, or simply sitting in nature, you reconnect with your inner compass. You remember what's important and what's just noise. This inner clarity makes it easier to make decisions that align with your true self rather than reacting to external demands. Ultimately, silence is a form of self-respect. It says, my peace is more important than winning this argument. My clarity is more valuable than your misunderstanding. My truth doesn't need to be shouted to be real. In a world that rewards speed and noise, choosing silence is a radical act. It's not about withdrawing from life. It's about engaging with life on your own terms. It's about creating a sanctuary within yourself where you can separate emotion from value, pain from meaning, and reaction from response. The next time you find yourself in a heated situation, remember the power of Silence. Pause. Breathe. Listen not to the chaos around you, but to the quiet wisdom within. You might be surprised by what you discover. Often, the answers we seek are not out there in someone else's words or actions. They're inside us, waiting to be heard. And the only way to hear them is to get quiet enough to listen. Humans have an almost universal craving for something called closure. The desire for a clear, definite ending to a painful situation. Whether it's a relationship, a friendship, or even a job, we want a final conversation, a moment where everything makes sense, where the other person explains why they hurt us or left us. It's like watching a movie and needing to see the ending before you can leave the theater. Without closure, our minds keep replaying the story, rewriting the script, searching for answers we may never get. This is why people stay up at night rereading old texts, stalking social media, or replaying arguments in their heads. We believe that if we just get that one honest conversation, that perfect explanation, we'll finally be able to move on. The painful truth is that many people will never give you the closure you want. Sometimes they don't know how. Sometimes they simply don't care enough to provide it. And sometimes the truth they would tell you is so unsatisfying or hurtful that it wouldn't bring peace. Anyway, think about ghosting, a common phenomenon in dating today. One day someone is texting you constantly, making plans, and then suddenly, nothing. No explanation, no udvie. You're left in silence, wondering what you did wrong. Your instinct might be to send message after message, to demand answers. But even if they respond, their explanation probably won't heal the wound. In fact, it often makes things worse, because the very act of begging for closure hands them power over your healing. You're saying, I can't move on until you give me permission. The more you demand closure from someone else, the more you give away your freedom. It's like handing them the keys to your emotional prison. Every unanswered message, every ignored call, becomes another bar on the cell. You start to believe that your peace depends on their words, on their behavior, on their willingness to engage. But this is an illusion. Your peace has never been theirs to give. By begging, you extend the relationship in your mind long after it's over in reality. You replay the pain, keep the wound open, and prevent yourself from truly healing. It's a form of self-betrayal, choosing to stay stuck because you're waiting for someone who has already walked away. I once heard a story about a woman who wrote a long, heartfelt email to her ex-boyfriend after he ended their relationship. Abruptly, she poured out her feelings, explained how much he hurt her, and asked for clarity. She spent hours crafting every word, hoping he would respond with honesty. Days passed, then weeks, with no reply. Instead of feeling relieved or empowered, she felt emptier than before. The silence after sending that email was worse than the silence before. Why? Because she had given him the last word. By seeking closure from him, she had placed her healing entirely in his hands, and he simply chose not to give it back. This is the risk we take every time we demand answers from someone who has already shown us through their actions who they are. Stoic philosophy offers a different path. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, famously said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." In other words, don't waste your energy trying to convince others or extract explanations from them. Live your values. Act in alignment with who you want to be. When someone mistreats you, you don't need to lecture them or beg them to see your worth. You simply walk away with dignity. Your behavior becomes your statement. Instead of saying, "I deserve better," you show it by refusing to stay in situations where you are not respected. This is a radical shift because it takes the focus off the other person and puts it back on you where it belongs. Closure from a Stoic perspective is not something you receive. It's something you create. It's an internal process, not an external event. You don't need their apology to forgive. You don't need their explanation to understand. You don't need their permission to move on. When you realize this, you stop waiting for a conversation that will never happen. You stop writing those unsent drafts, rehearsing speeches in your head, or replaying old arguments. Instead, you begin to close the door yourself. This might look like journaling about your feelings, meditating to calm your mind, or talking with a therapist, or trusted friend. It might mean blocking their number or unfollowing them on social media, not out of anger, but to create space for your healing. The key is that you take action for yourself, not for them. Think of it like cleaning out a room after someone moves out. If you wait for them to come back and pack up their things, you might be waiting forever. In the meantime, you're living surrounded by clutter that keeps you stuck in the past. But when you take responsibility and clear the space yourself, you make room for something new. It's not fair that you have to do the work, but it's necessary. Similarly, emotional closure is about clearing out the mental and emotional clutter left behind by a painful experience. It's work you do for your own freedom, not because the other person deserves it. This doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or pretend you're not hurt. In fact, facing your pain honestly is a crucial part of closure. But instead of directing that pain outward at the person who hurt you, you direct it inward into growth. You might write in a journal, not to send a letter, but to process your own emotions. You might take up meditation to sit with your feelings without judgment. You might focus on developing new skills, hobbies, or relationships that remind you of your value. Each of these actions is a brick in the foundation of your self-respect. Over time, the need for external closure fades because you've built a life so rich and meaningful that their absence no longer defines you. A useful exercise comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. When you find yourself obsessing over what they would say if you could just have one more conversation, write down their imagined response. Be brutally honest with yourself. Then ask, would this really change anything? Most of the time, the answer is no. Even if they admitted fault, it wouldn't undo the past. Even if they explained their reasons, it wouldn't heal the wound. The real healing comes from accepting what happened, taking responsibility for your part, and choosing how you will move forward. That choice is entirely in your control. Modern culture often glamorizes dramatic confrontations. Movies and TV shows are full of scenes where the betrayed lover finally gets to shout, "Why did you do this to me?" And the other person tearfully confesses, leading to some kind of resolution. But real life is rarely so tidy. Often, the people who hurt us will never admit it. They may rewrite the story to make themselves the hero, or they may disappear entirely. Waiting for them to give you a cinematic ending only keeps you stuck in their narrative. The Stoic path is quieter but far more powerful. You write your own ending. You decide this chapter is closed, and you act accordingly. You don't need to announce it to them or to anyone else. You simply live it. There's a saying that closure is a myth. That's not entirely true. Closure exists, but it doesn't come from other people. It comes from you. When you stop expecting someone else to hand it to you, you take back your power. You realize that peace is not something you beg for. It's something you build. And every time you resist the urge to send that one last message, to make that one last call, you're strengthening the muscle of self-respect. In practical terms, this might mean setting a clear boundary. No more checking their social media, no more rereading old conversations, no more imagining what you would say. If you ran into them, each time those thoughts arise, you gently redirect your focus to something constructive. It's not about denying the pain. It's about refusing to feed it. Over time, the thoughts come less frequently, and the emotional charge fades. What once felt like an open wound becomes a scar, a reminder of what you survived, but no longer a source of constant suffering. When you embody this philosophy, you inspire others without even trying. Friends may notice your calm and ask how you manage to move on without a dramatic confrontation. Strangers may sense your grounded energy and feel drawn to it. You become living proof of Epictetus's wisdom. You don't need to explain your philosophy. You show it through how you live. And in a world full of noise and chaos, that kind of quiet strength is magnetic. Begging for closure is like standing outside a locked door, pounding and shouting, while your true life waits for you down the hall. The longer you stay there, the more time you waste. When you finally turn away and walk toward your future, you realize the door was never worth your energy. It doesn't matter whether they open it or not. What matters is that you chose to walk free. That is the essence of Stoic closure. not waiting for someone else to release you, but unlocking yourself from the inside. Many people grow up believing that explaining yourself is a sign of strength. We think if we can just explain clearly enough, we can change someone's mind, defend our reputation, or fix a misunderstanding. It feels like a natural instinct. Someone misunderstands you, so you tell your side of the story. Someone criticizes you, so you give them reasons why they're wrong. But here's the truth that most of us don't want to face. Constant explaining is not a sign of strength. It's a sign of fear. It comes from a deep need to be seen as good, to control how others see you. When you explain and re-explain yourself, you're really saying, I need you to approve of me. I need you to understand me, so I can feel okay about myself. That's not confidence. That's dependence. True confidence, on the other hand, doesn't need to be narrated. A confident person knows who they are and what they stand for, and they understand that not everyone will see it or agree with it. They don't waste their energy trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding them. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, captured this perfectly when he said, "Don't waste what remains of your life in speculating about others." In modern terms, don't burn up your precious time and energy trying to manage other people's opinions. Those opinions are outside your control. Your actions, your values, your choices, those are yours. That's where your focus belongs. When you try to explain yourself to someone who has already made up their mind, you're stepping into a game you can't win. Imagine being accused of something you didn't do. Your instinct might be to defend yourself, to give all the evidence proving your innocence. But often, the more you talk, the guiltier you seem. It's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. In relationships, this dynamic is especially painful. If someone you love doubts your intentions, explaining over and over can backfire. They may start to believe that your desperation to explain is proof you're hiding something. The harder you try to convince them, the more they pull away. At a certain point, your need to be understood becomes more damaging than the original misunderstanding. There's a story of a well-known CEO who faced a major scandal in his company. The media attacked him, employees questioned his decisions, and investors were nervous. Everyone expected him to go on a press tour, to issue long statements defending himself. But he didn't. He gave one brief, factual statement, then got back to work. Over the next 6 months, the company's performance improved dramatically. Revenue rose, employees rallied, and the results spoke louder than any words could. Eventually, even his harshest critics had to admit that he had handled the crisis well. His silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. By refusing to waste energy on endless explanations, he stayed focused on what he could control: his actions. That's real leadership. On a smaller scale, this happens in everyday work life too. Maybe someone spreads a rumor about you at the office. The urge to defend yourself is overwhelming. You want to call everyone into a room and set the record straight. But often, that just adds fuel to the fire. The people who believe you don't need an explanation. The people who don't believe you won't be convinced by one. The smartest move is to keep your head down and let your work do the talking. Deliver results so undeniable that the rumor eventually looks ridiculous. People forget words, but they remember patterns. Over time, consistent action builds a reputation far stronger than any speech ever could. This principle also applies in love and friendship. When someone you care about starts to drift away or accuse you unfairly, your instinct might be to explain yourself endlessly. Please understand, that's not what I meant. Let me tell you why I did what I did. But the sad truth is, the more you explain, the more they start to think you have something to hide. Silence, in these moments, can actually be more powerful. If someone truly knows your heart, they won't need constant justification. If they don't, no amount of words will change their perception. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let go and allow them to come to their own conclusions, even if those conclusions are wrong. That's not coldness. That's respect for yourself and the relationship. I experienced this lesson firsthand. When a misunderstanding happened between me and a close friend, they accused me of something I hadn't done, and I was devastated. My first instinct was to send a long message explaining every detail, every thought process, every reason why they were wrong. But something in me said, wait. I stayed silent. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Weeks passed. Then, out of nowhere, my friend reached out and apologized. They told me they had time to think, to reflect, and they realized on their own that they had misunderstood me. If I had jumped in with frantic explanations, it probably would have turned into a bigger fight. My silence gave them the space to see the truth for themselves. That experience changed me. I realized that sometimes silence isn't passive, it's active trust in your own integrity. Explaining yourself over and over is like trying to shout over a storm. No matter how loud you get, the wind drowns you out. Silence, by contrast, is like building a solid house and shutting the door. The storm may rage outside, but you're safe inside because you know who you are. This doesn't mean you never speak up. There are times when a simple clarification is necessary, especially in professional settings. But there's a difference between clarifying once and defending endlessly. The first is about communication. The second is about fear. You can feel the difference in your body. Explaining from fear feels frantic and exhausting. Clarifying from calm feels clean and simple, like setting down a burden. From a practical perspective, how do you apply this? Start by paying attention to your impulses. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Ask yourself, who am I explaining to and why? Is this person open to understanding me? Or have they already made up their mind? Will my explanation actually solve the problem? Or is it just about soothing my anxiety? If the answer is that they won't understand or that it won't change anything, choose silence. Instead of sending that long text or writing the defensive email, redirect your energy into action. If it's at work, focus on delivering great results. If it's in a relationship, focus on showing up with kindness and consistency. If it's in your personal life, focus on growing into the kind of person you respect. Over time, those actions will speak for themselves. Social media makes this especially challenging. Platforms are designed to make us feel like we have to respond immediately to every comment, every accusation, every misunderstanding. But the truth is, you don't owe the internet an explanation for your choices. You don't need to jump into every argument or defend every decision publicly. The people who truly matter already know who you are. The rest are spectators. And spectators will always have opinions. Let them. As Marcus Aurelius would say, don't waste what remains of your life worrying about them. Spend your limited time on things you can control. Your character, your actions, your purpose. There's a quiet kind of power that comes with not explaining yourself. It unsettles people who are used to controlling others through guilt or manipulation. When you refuse to play their game, they have nothing to grab onto. They may call you cold, arrogant, or uncaring. Let them. Their labels are about them, not you. The more you stay grounded in your truth, the more their noise fades into the background. Over time, the people who genuinely care will stick around. The ones who just wanted to control the narrative will drift away. That's a painful but necessary sorting process. Confidence is not about proving yourself to everyone. It's about knowing yourself so deeply that you don't need to prove anything at all. It's walking into a room and not needing to announce your worth because it's already evident in how you carry yourself. It's facing criticism without crumbling, praise without becoming addicted to it, and misunderstanding without desperation. When you reach this level of confidence, your silence becomes your strongest statement. It says, I know who I am. I don't need you to understand me for me to be whole. In the end, the most convincing explanation you can ever give is your life itself. Your choices, your consistency, your integrity that's your argument. And it's one that doesn't require words. When you stop explaining and start living your truth, you free yourself from the exhausting need to be seen a certain way. Some people will misunderstand you forever. That's okay. Let them. While they waste their energy speculating, you'll be out there building a life so solid, so meaningful, that no rumor or accusation can touch it. That's the real victory, not winning an argument, but becoming unshakable in who you are. There's a certain kind of lesson that words can't teach. People expect drama when relationships end, whether it's a romantic breakup, leaving a toxic workplace, or walking away from a one-sided friendship. They expect yelling, long explanations, and emotional scenes because those reactions give them something to hold on to. When you choose to walk away quietly, you disrupt that entire pattern. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront themselves without distraction. It's unsettling because most people are prepared to fight your words, but they're never prepared to face the echo of their own actions. When someone mistreats you, they expect you to react. That reaction gives them power. If you scream, they can call you crazy. If you explain, they can twist your words. If you beg, they can feel superior. But if you simply stop showing up, stop engaging, and move on without a single declaration, they're left alone with nothing but their own behavior. They can't blame your anger or rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. They're stuck replaying the last moments in their mind, trying to guess what you're thinking. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This is exactly what happens when you leave in silence. Your absence triggers their imagination, and the stories they tell themselves are often far more painful than anything you could have said. Imagine a toxic workplace where management routinely disrespects employees. Most people would expect a dramatic confrontation when someone decides to quit a fiery resignation speech, maybe even a public email calling out all the problems. But one employee decides to do something different. They quietly submit their resignation, thank the team politely, and leave without fanfare. At first, leadership might feel relieved. No confrontation, no mess. But then, as days and weeks go by, they notice the gap. Projects slow down because that person was carrying more weight than they realized. Other employees start asking questions. Why did they really leave? Rumors spread, and leaders are forced to look inward. The silence becomes louder than any speech could have been. It forces reflection. Sometimes the most powerful feedback isn't delivered in words, it's delivered in absence. Walking away in silence isn't about revenge or manipulation. It's about dignity. When you're truly done, you don't need to announce it. Saying, "I'm done," over and over usually means you're not. It's like threatening to leave a bad relationship, but never packing your bags. Real endings are quiet. They don't need an audience. They simply happen, and the lack of noise speaks volumes. In relationships, this kind of exit is profound. When someone treats you as if you're replaceable and you respond by begging for them to see your worth, you reinforce their behavior. But when you silently remove yourself from their life, you teach them a lesson no lecture ever could. Access to you is a privilege, not a right. And once it's gone, it's gone. Silence also teaches you. It teaches you how much strength you actually have. It takes incredible self-control to resist the urge to send that one last text, to write that long email, to explain your side one more time. It's natural to want closure, to want to make the other person understand. But every time you resist, you build a muscle inside yourself. You prove that your peace doesn't depend on anyone else's reaction. Over time, this inner strength becomes unshakable. You stop fearing endings because you know you can survive them without losing your dignity. Think about how this shows up online. In today's world, people air their conflicts publicly. Breakups become Instagram stories. Work grievances turn into viral posts. It feels satisfying in the moment to tell your truth, but it rarely leads to real healing. More often, it just feeds drama and gives people more to gossip about. Choosing silence in this environment is almost revolutionary. It's refusing to participate in the circus. It's saying, I don't need likes or comments to validate my decisions. My life is my own, and I'll protect its privacy. The truth is, people rarely change because you told them to. They change because they lose something valuable and are forced to face the consequences of their actions. When you yell at someone to respect you, they might comply temporarily, but deep down, they haven't learned anything. When you leave quietly and never return, the loss speaks for itself. It creates a space where they either grow or stay stuck, but either way, you've freed yourself. It's a win regardless of what they do next. There's also a psychological edge to silence. When there's no final conversation, no clear ending, the mind fills in the blanks. This is why ghosting feels so painful it leaves the other person's imagination running wild. When you walk away quietly, the other person has to sit with their unanswered questions. Did you stop caring? Are you thriving without them? Do you even think about them at all? That uncertainty can be a powerful teacher. It forces them to examine their behavior in a way that no argument ever could. In practical terms, this doesn't mean you should disappear without tying up necessary loose ends. If you're leaving a job, you still submit proper notice. If you're ending a relationship, you may need to communicate basic logistics. But beyond that, you owe no one a dramatic speech. The key is to keep your words simple and your actions final. No long explanations. No rehashing old fights. Just calm, decisive movement toward the life you want. Walking away in silence also protects your energy. Words are expensive. Every argument, every explanation, every attempt to win drains you. When you stop spending that energy on people who don't value it, you have more to invest in things that truly matter. Your growth, your passions, your future. Instead of writing a 5-paragraph message to someone who won't appreciate it, you could write in a journal, create art, or plan your next step forward. Silence redirects your focus from the back to you. The most powerful statement you can ever make is how you live after you walk away. If you leave quietly, but then thrive loudly, building a life filled with joy, purpose, and peace that speaks louder than any confrontation. People will notice. They may never admit it, but they will. And while they're left wondering what could have been, you'll be too busy living fully to care. In the end, silence is both the lesson and the liberation. It teaches others that you won't be manipulated or controlled. It teaches you that you don't need external validation to be whole. It transforms endings from battles into transitions. You don't need to slam the door or announce that it's closed. You just stop walking through it. Real power isn't in the words you shout on your way out, it's in the life you build once you're gone. When you can leave without a speech, without a final dig, without needing them to know how strong you are, that's when you've truly won. Because the truth is, your silence will always echo louder than any explanation ever could. If you've made it this far, take a moment to acknowledge yourself. That in itself is a kind of silence, a pause, a reflection. Because what we've discussed today isn't easy. It goes against everything society teaches us. The world tells you to fight for closure, to explain until they finally get it, to chase love and approval as if your worth depends on it. But today, you've learned a different path. The path of the Stoic warrior. Let's recap the 6 truths we explored together. First, silence makes people feel your absence more than they ever heard your words. When you stop chasing, when you stop filling the air with explanations, people suddenly notice the space you've left behind. That absence speaks louder than any argument could. Second, silence helps you hear the truth not from others, but from within. In a world of constant noise, silence is a sacred space where you can separate fleeting emotions from lasting values. It's where you discover what you really think, what you really want, and who you really are. Third, begging for closure only betrays yourself. The harsh reality is that many people will never give you the clarity or apology you crave. Closure isn't something they give you, it's something you create for yourself by walking away and deciding, this chapter is over. Fourth, silence reveals what words try to hide. When you stop engaging, people's patterns become clear. Actions speak louder than apologies, and silence gives you the clarity to see who truly respects you and who doesn't. Fifth, true confidence means not explaining yourself to those who don't want to understand. Your energy is too valuable to waste on convincing others of your worth. Live your truth. Let your consistency speak for you. And finally, silence teaches the ultimate lesson to others and to yourself. Walking away quietly is not weakness. It's the most powerful statement you can make. It forces others to confront their behavior without the distraction of your words. And it teaches you that your peace, your dignity, your freedom, they are yours to claim, no matter what anyone else does. Think back on the stories we explored. The employee who left a toxic workplace without drama, leaving the leadership team to face their own failures. The partner who stopped begging for closure and instead chose self-healing. The leader who let results speak louder than excuses. These are real-life examples of silence as strength. Now, let's bring this home to you. Where in your life are you chasing, begging, or explaining? Maybe it's a relationship where you keep justifying why you deserve respect. Maybe it's a workplace where you're constantly defending yourself against rumors or politics. Maybe it's even within your own family, where you've been playing the role of peacemaker at the cost of your own peace. What would it look like to stop? To simply stand still and let the noise fall away? To let your actions, your boundaries, and your silence speak for themselves? This isn't about cutting people off with coldness. It's about stepping into your power and saying, I don't need to participate in this chaos anymore. Remember Seneca's wisdom. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. When you walk away in silence, other people are left to sit with their own imagination. They will wonder what you're thinking, why you left, whether you've moved on. That's their journey, not yours. Your journey is to keep moving forward, lighter and freer than before. And here's the beautiful part. The moment you stop chasing, begging, and explaining, you create space for something better. Healthy relationships, honest conversations, opportunities that align with your values. When you stop pouring energy into the wrong places, you finally have the energy to build the life you deserve. Before we end, let me leave you with one final affirmation. My silence is my last word, and my most powerful one. Say it with me, out loud or in your heart. Let it be your mantra the next time you're tempted to defend yourself, to send that extra text, to explain just one more time. If this video resonated with you, please take a moment to like it. It may seem like a small gesture, but it helps spread this message to more people who need it. Share this video with someone in your life who's struggling to find their strength, someone who's stuck in a cycle of chasing, begging, or explaining. Your share might be the spark that changes their perspective. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. We create weekly content dedicated to helping you grow stronger, calmer, and more free through the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy and modern psychology. By subscribing, you're joining a community of people committed to living with intention instead of reaction. Finally, if you want to directly support this work, consider using the Super Thanks feature. Your donation, no matter the size, helps keep this channel alive so we can continue creating meaningful content for you and thousands of others around the world. Your silence, your strength, your growth, they matter. Thank you for spending this time with me. Now go out into the world, not with anger, not with explanations, but with quiet, steady power. Walk away from what no longer serves you. Let your silence speak, and watch as the world begins to listen.